Before we dive into the episode, we just want to let you know that there are conversations surrounding the topic of suicide. If you or someone you know may be struggling with suicidal thoughts, you can call the U.S. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Please know that you are not alone. Hey, I'm Kelly.
And I'm Paul.
We want to welcome you, as always, to the fungus among us.
Yes, welcome back. We're really excited for this episode. We're going to be covering Endure and Survive.
Endure and survive. Yeah, that's right. For this podcast episode, we are going to be covering part 2 of 2 on Henry and Sam.
And as we predicted, the arc was completed in this episode, and oh boy, was it a doozy.
Yeah.
The episode title, Endure and Survive, of course, taken from the fictional comic book that Ellie loves, Savage Starlight, which also made a triumphant appearance in this episode, and I almost came out of my seat. As you know, I'm a huge fan of Savage Starlight.
I know you are. I almost jumped out of my seat for you as soon as that came up in the show. I was like, all right, here we go.
And they showed the cover art, and there's even a scene where you can pause it and look at panels from the actual comic book, and they even upped the ante by making it something that Ellie and Sam bonded over, and I was so in love. But I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Yeah, it's hard not to. This was certainly an episode that gives us a lot to digest, and it's traumatizing.
Yes, it is traumatizing. It is traumatizing. It's this show hurts us so good.
I mean, for me, that's what I think I meant in our prior episode, that I was sort of glad it was a setup. Felt like we kind of needed somewhat of a break from the trauma of losing someone. I now have a higher appreciation for the episode that sets up Joel and Ellie and somewhat of their bonding and getting to know each other.
Yeah, it was nice to do this episode, which obviously it's The Last of Us, so it had some violence and it had some death, but mostly it was just focused on like puns and like them making fun of each other. So it was a nice little break from all the tragedy.
I was very excited for this episode, especially after that cliffhanger, because Henry and Sam are really special characters to me in the game. I absolutely love what they did with these characters in the show. I think maybe even more so.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with you. They came to life so beautifully. There was the one slight change of that in this version, Sam is deaf and communicates with ASL and his little pad. But even that, other than that, I mean, the characters were brought forth so faithfully, and both of those actors were so good. You know, just like it took zero time for me to 100% feel like they were hugely three-dimensional characters that I knew really well. Like literally, like within the first scene of this episode, and just their relationship and the way they were interacting, I was immediately felt like, you know, they were my family.
Yeah, I'm certainly really satisfied that we were able to get a background on their story before returning back to Joel and Ellie.
I also appreciated that, and not only was it nice to get a background on them, but it was very efficient, and we got back to Joel and Ellie faster than I thought we would, which was also nice. So I just really felt like this episode was a roller coaster. It was always moving forward.
Oh, yeah.
Not only did we get the backstory for Henry and Sam, but we also got a little bit of Kathleen's backstory too, which was nice.
I'm so glad that we did. I felt it was interesting to connect more deeply with her childhood. Kathleen is a very calculated, out for blood kind of person. You can see she is smart, but as we also find out, her emotions and this need for vengeance will ultimately get the best of her and her choices in the end.
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting choice to cast Sam as deaf. I think it really has us feeling that there is an even higher dependency with Henry taking care of him, which like really reflects kind of the relationship between Joel and Ellie in a way that it didn't in the game. Do you know what I mean?
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that, but it does. And, you know, along those same lines in terms of making Sam more dependent on Henry, he's also a little bit younger than the game. Because I think in the game, he's like almost Ellie's age, right? And in this, they made him 8 years old.
I think
Yeah.
he was a little
So,
younger in the game too, but still. Um,
and he was a little bit younger, but if I remember right in the game, he was like 12 or something. Like, I think he was old enough to seem like he had a crush on Ellie or something. I could be misremembering that. I don't know. But,
I played it recently and I didn't get that vibe. I got that they were like good friends or
yeah.
gonna
But
become
that's
good friends.
Yeah, yeah. And that's also another thing that was sort of enhanced and deepened in the show's interpretation of the story with him being younger and Ellie sort of reaching out to him more. And I mean, I felt like she bonded with Sam a lot more in this episode than she did in the game, and we see her kind of being an older sister. And then
Absolutely.
yeah, and then of course that pays off in a way that we'll discuss later when we get to the end too, which is pretty heavy.
In some senses, she takes on this role of a caretaker, which I
Yeah.
found unique. It's hard not to get ahead of myself or ourselves, I think, with this episode because Henry and Sam really elevate so much of what's going on with Joel and Ellie in the game and in the show. I had a harder time watching this episode because I ultimately knew the fate of Henry and Sam, and the topic of suicide or, a scene or a situation where somebody takes their own life is extremely triggering for me because I've personally struggled with suicidal attempts in the past, and it really was hard to watch. It was a lot of loss in this episode for sure.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's an extremely difficult topic, and I had the same thing. Like, I was had this weird sense of denial while I was watching the
Mhm.
episode because it was
Mm.
such a fun episode in so many ways. Like all the banter between the characters was so great, and there were so many funny moments and emotional moments, and there was such this sweet like sibling feeling relationship developing between Ellie and Sam. And then there's this kick
Yeah.
ass action stuff and this cool scene of Infected just wrecking
Oh,
shit.
yeah.
And like there was so much to love in this episode, and the whole time I would have this thought every now and then like, wait a minute, is this really going to end the like is this really leading up to that moment that I fucking know is coming? And then I would just kind of be like, I can't think about that. And that can't be, like it
Mm.
was like I was almost creating this weird little space where I was like trying to tell myself that wasn't going to happen. you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was in a bubble where I felt, okay, well, these characters and these actors performing these characters are so excellent. This show does a really great job of introducing you to these people that we just want to stay with. But again, this world shows us anyone can lose, which makes me think about
Mm.
the beginning of the entire show when the epidemiologist talks about humans surviving a pandemic. But if humans were exposed to this type of fungal infection, we lose.
It's interesting that you bring that up because, like, yeah, there's this feeling of inevitability, like, and having, a lot of the themes of this are about like having hope, or is there any point in having hope when things are so fucked up, and it's things characters talk about a lot. And then in this episode, I don't know how much the writers wanted us to think about it, but then this episode kind of starts to bring up the idea of fate and determination, even,
Yeah.
which comes toward the end of the episode. So maybe we talk about it then. But Melanie, Kathleen starts talking about like, well, maybe he was meant to die, kind of stuff, and like,
Oh, yeah.
don't mess with fate and stuff like that. So it really is
Mhm.
constantly like asking you to think about the idea that like there's just never any hope for anyone. It's so dark.
The fact that Kathleen was just ruthless in regards to a child's life, that maybe he should have died, or maybe he was meant to die because he was diagnosed with cancer, leukemia. And of course, we're talking about Sam, that ultimately she's killed by a child clicker. And I thought, wow, the storytelling is just like my mind is blown.
Totally. But no, I know that was beautiful. And as long as we're on the topic, like just to carry this whole theme of like fate versus free will through, she is the
Yeah.
one who has the point of view that's like, maybe he was meant to die. And then he does die. So it's like, well, maybe that's a fulfillment of her prophecy. But he only
Mm,
died because she was chasing them. If she hadn't put them in that situation, Sam would have never died. You know what I mean? So it's almost like it was a
yeah.
self fulfilling prophecy.
I just found that scene where she was communicating with those collaborators to be so gnarly. The fact that she, like, had a rat come tell the truth of where Henry and Sam might be and said, "We're gonna put you on trial. No, you will be found guilty. However, you'll just serve some time." As if this new world order makes better sense than Fedra. And I was very nervous of what she was gonna be capable of. And
Right.
she, had her crew execute them all. And I was even though she told them they would live. So certainly set up a sense of extreme fear for Henry, Sam, Joel, and Ellie.
Yeah. I mean, my take is that, there was nothing that Kathleen wouldn't be capable of. That like that the ending there, which I
No.
don't know, we keep jumping ahead to this moment with Kathleen, but it's kind of like everything in the episode that gets introduced about her character, it, hinges on this final moment with her and the way that
Mhm.
she behaves when she finally has Henry in her crosshairs. I felt like she made it pretty clear too that she wasn't just going to kill Henry. She was going to kill Sam and Ellie too. Cause he was like, let the kids go. And she's like, I can't. They're with you guys. Like, she's going to execute
Yeah.
these two children as well. Like, this woman was hardcore mean.
Which again, I found like back to your fate point, the fact that it's like a child clicker that has the agility of a cheetah to ultimately kill her was just whoa, what a scene. My jaw dropped. It was one of those moments where you know how I'm very like reactive to things happening on the screen.
Oh,
You
yeah.
would have like told me to calm down.
No,
I
I wouldn't
was
have. I would
I
have.
was
I would
freaking
have. I
out.
would have laughed. I wouldn't have told you to calm down in a moment like that.
Like,
I would
I
have
was
laughed.
pacing I was pacing the room at that point,
Okay, I might have
but
told you to calm down. To even jump back further, like talking about, that scene where Kathleen's talking to the rats, the informants, and the way that she's treating them, and then also just leading into that, there were the scenes of, just after her group took over control from Fedra, and they were just bloodthirsty. I mean,
mhm,
they were introduced. It was an interesting way to introduce her group because, on the one hand, they were freedom fighters who seemed to have, there's no question that they were suffering all kinds of horrible abuses by Fedra and stuff like that when Fedra was in control. But then the second they got power, they just became equally monstrous, and
yeah,
so it's just it's just a super interesting way to introduce them and to just constantly be asking us the question about where's the line between good and bad and how do we feel about anything anybody does. The waters just get so murky in this show. So I love that.
and then what is that revolution all for if you're just repeating history?
Yeah. And, it's like, yeah, no, it raises interesting moral questions about like, what do you do about these people who did cooperate with the previous regime, the Fedra regime, which was, I mean, it's pretty clear that Fedra was really bad before they took over in this city because they've heard about it even in Boston. There was the part where
Mhm.
Joel was like, "Oh yeah, they're gangsters and thugs or whatever he called them."
Especially after that scene of Kathleen giving the backstory of her brother, and her brother was sort of the leader originally of this revolution and noted to be like, a really intelligent man who was also about forgiveness. And to
A
see
very
this
good man,
polar,
it sounds like. Yeah.
yeah, and to see this polar opposite in his sister, Kathleen.
Can we talk about one moment that was a small moment, but it was maybe my second favorite part of the episode?
Oh, please. I'm curious.
The part where
I wonder if
the
it's the
moment where
same.
we what's that?
No, I wonder if it's the same.
What I'm talking, the part that I absolutely loved, I was just laughing my ass off. Partly because it was funny, but partly because it was such a perfect character moment. Was where Henry and Sam have the guns on Joel and Ellie, and he's trying to tell Joel like, "Okay, we're gonna put the guns away. We're gonna be cool, right?" And Joel's agreeing with him, but in such a scary way that he won't put the gun away. So that was such a brilliant moment from Pedro Pascal. Like no matter what he said, it just sounded like Joel was about to jump up and break his neck.
Yeah, no, and Ellie's fantastic reaction of like, "Yeah, no, he's just an asshole, and he sounds that way."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like their dynamic that we've loved since 2013 is just there
Yep.
100% fully formed and
Mhm.
maybe even a little more perfect than it was in the game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was thinking of a moment where when they do decide to collaborate to escape Kansas City. I felt like it was an interesting moment that put Joel in yet another difficult position where Henry communicates back to Sam, yeah, they're going to help us in ASL when Joel hadn't yet committed to it.
Yeah. Not only does he say it in ASL, but he says it out loud, so they know
with
that he's telling Sam that.
with
When he
such enthusiasm, exactly.
Yeah, and like usually when he talks to Sam using ASL, he doesn't talk out loud as much, like a lot of the time it's subtitled. But in that moment, yeah, he was just basically emotionally blackmailing them into agreeing.
You could just see Ellie's face like, "Well, Joel, it's happening."
Yeah, and there was a really fun Joel dynamic in this episode that I loved, which was just him becoming increasingly annoyed by the situation. Like he was annoyed
Yeah.
that they were having fun, and annoyed that they were being loud, and annoying that they felt like they were safe, and then he was like annoyed that they wanted to hang out in the tunnels. I just loved Joel having to constantly go along with everything in this episode. It was hilarious to me.
So speaking of the tunnels, once Joel and Ellie, Henry and Sam get to the tunnels, a revealing moment to me that shows how Joel and Ellie's relationship has become more like family and is based on a foundation of trust. It's a really quick moment, but Joel decides to hand Ellie a gun. And you can sort of see on her face that Ellie is really happy to take on this role of feeling like she's also needed and needed by Joel to help protect this group.
Yeah, the part where they're going into the tunnels, and he's like, "Have your gun ready."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she was. There was a long beat of her standing there just being super stoked, almost to the point where I wanted to be like, all right, settle down, kid. Like, you're not the sheriff."
Like, because they're really, like, carefully building up this, relationship to what it is ultimately in the end. So,
They are, yeah. Carefully is the right word because there's so much depth and so much specificity to the interactions between Joel and Ellie and what both actors are doing with it. It's really the best thing that the show is doing. In a show that has all kinds of good stuff happening, they are just nailing that relationship so well. It's amazing.
it's around the time where Henry says something like, your dad is, like, uptight," and they immediately go, "I'm not her father," and she goes, "I'm not his dad," like, at the same time, almost
Yeah.
instantaneous, and, like, it's like they're just so in denial about the fact that they're now family.
Yeah, that was so great. And when that happened, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that part's in the game. And that is just like I'm surprised that it wasn't. Like that seems like such an important like sort of milestone in their relationship is them both like reflexively denying the father-daughter bond that's obviously developing. Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of making this into a TV show,
Yeah.
They're in the tunnels and they come across this, what would you call it?
I would call it like an underground daycare shelter for a bunch of kids that were sheltering there at some point in the past.
But where did they go? It was just empty.
Yeah, it wasn't clear what had happened to them. Well, we know from the game that they all got overrun and died. Because there was when they're in there, they find the little crayon drawing that says like our
Mm,
protectors, Ish and Danny. And that's from the game. And when you're exploring that area in
yep.
the game, you eventually find like notes and stuff that indicate I think like one of the two protector guys got infected and then somehow it got back in and like God, I think it may have even ended with like one of the teachers like killing all the kids because they were trapped and they were infected outside. It got really dark. That environment in
Yeah.
the game had a really tragic backstory. I don't remember all the details exactly,
Mm.
but it was something like that.
I that's why I love replaying this game is I feel like if you miss a note, you'll pick it up when you play the
For sure.
game. Anyway, I love chaotic zombie scenes.
Oh
And
my
this
God. Well,
was
I think that's
so well
something we
done.
share. Oh my God. Amazing. The way that it just goes from like an empty frame to like an unimaginable onslaught of infected, like
Mhm.
pouring at the camera. And then the whole rest of the scene is just like mayhem and chaos and horror. Amazing.
They reached that scene in the game where there's a sniper from a house and they're, like, in a cul-de-sac, and I was like, "Wow, they did it." It was just so well done. There's this sniper shooting at the 4 of them, and another moment from Joel, he asks Ellie, "Do you trust me?" Because he's clearly gonna go take out the sniper while they hide out in the street. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, so we've arrived. This relationship of Joel and Ellie, it's we've arrived to it, is what I feel like.
For sure. And you really, and also in that moment, you really see it settle in with Ellie. Like it's almost like in that moment being asked that question, she realizes, like, yeah, actually, I guess I do trust him completely. And maybe she hadn't thought about it like that before.
Yeah, and I think, the reason why I bring it up is I feel like in the game, emotionally, we weren't quite there yet between the 2 of them, and that's why I love this show. Well, but the
Yeah.
show and the game, but
The place in the game where I got that feeling that they trusted each other completely was sort of at the end of this sequence. After there's the part where he gives Ellie the rifle and she covers him. They kind of reversed it for the show, which was interesting. But in the game, she
they did,
covers him
yeah.
from the tower while he's going around fighting hunter guys. And
Something like that may still happen, but yeah,
could still
that was
happen.
a defining moment for them trusting
But
each other in the game.
yeah, but I mean, I felt like maybe this episode was it because they reversed it. They had Joel covering her, and you see her like making her choices on the battlefield about where she's going to go and trying to get away from infected, and you see her clocking the fact that Joel is protecting her. Like that one that was about to bite me. Oh, Joel shot it. You know.
In the game, we do become we take over the role of the sniper and we shoot out the people after them and some clickers, and that is Joel as he covers the 3 of them, Henry, Sam, and Ellie. They definitely combine a lot of things and condense it in this episode, which I think they did flawlessly.
They continue to do such an amazing job of remixing iconic moments from the game, hitting all the big ones almost exactly right, you know, like exactly the same, but then also having them arranged in a whole new configuration with all this new stuff
Mhm.
going on. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like we say this every episode, actually.
We're just gonna title our podcast from now on, The Last of Us is amazing.
Yeah.
But hey, that's why we are self-proclaimed super fans.
We are. Yeah.
I mean, my whole thing of getting to that was, again, it's just there's constant reveals that Joel and Ellie are a team now. Before we get into the major zombie scene, I feel like Ellie has had this effect on Joel where when Joel finally reaches the sniper that's trying to take all 4 of them out, he almost begs this guy to put the gun down. Like he didn't want to kill someone again. So you can kind of continue to see the change in him in these episodes.
No, it's so true. I was really surprised by that. And I'm so glad you brought it up because, yeah, I mean, I think that was a huge moment for Joel because I feel like even as recently as like 2 episodes ago, Joel would have just,
You said 2 episodes a goal.
I know. Okay, so I said a goal. 2 episodes ago, I feel like Joe, wait, no, fuck. No, what I'm saying is, I'm saying that this feels like a new thing for Joel. You know, like he has not been in the habit of like letting people go. You know, I mean, it seems like even just since the last episode and him killing that kid and having Ellie be involved in that, like it's really changing the way he thinks about his lifestyle. And he just did not want to kill that guy, which was a pretty surprising shift.
Yeah.
So one thing that I was kept waiting for during this episode was for the infected to show up. Especially they're like, oh, those tunnels, you know, they could have infected in them. We need you to get us through. And then they go down there and there aren't any, and they pop back out. And I was like, come on, man, where are the infected? And
Yeah.
boy, did
Oh,
I get my wish.
you mean when Joel, Ellie, Henry, and Sam are down in the tunnels and there ends up being no clickers?
Well, yeah, because they
Yeah.
had a whole conversation about how he's like, well, no, they should be clear, but I want you to protect us just in case there may be some down there. So it really feels
Right,
like there's going
right.
to be a huge onslaught in the tunnel, and there was in the game. That part of the game was really hard.
It
So then when they came
was.
out with that, I was like, is this going to be another episode with no infected? Oh boy, did I get my wish! All of a sudden we have this amazing action scene, which by the way was cool before the infected even showed up. It was already a really cool action scene.
When you see like Kathleen come out with like her group of people from the cars and she's like saying to Henry, come out wherever you are. Certainly things shifted and it got more intense.
Like I was already on the edge of my seat just when the truck was like coming and like ramming the cars out of the way, and Ellie and Henry and Sam are just like running away from this truck, and Joel's trying to take out the driver. Like that was already crazy enough. And then there's the confrontation that we kind of talked about with Kathleen and Henry, and then the truck sinks. And we already know that there's some kind of huge underground threat. Well, it's been explained to us by Henry, but also, we've seen that this faction is hiding, this weird sinkhole thing that's moving underneath one of their houses. And we also know from episode 2 that these fungus infected people can communicate via vast underground mycelial networks. So
Yeah.
the second that truck sinks, everybody there, and of course we the audience, all know that shit is about to get super, super real.
And before it gets super real with the zombies, there's that exchange between Kathleen and Henry. Henry is going to turn himself in. This is the moment in my head where I was like, okay, maybe this might go a different direction and Sam will continue on, because Ellie grabs Sam's hand and I think, okay, they're going to make a run for it. But as you said, yeah, that truck sinking into the ground, releasing all these zombies, of course, changed the story back to its kind of original plan. But yeah, no, I found myself, as we talked earlier, hoping, holding out that hope that there would be some sort of continuation of Sam, or like I was in denial for sure throughout this episode that we would
Yeah.
lose these characters.
Yeah, but in that moment, and you know what, I had completely forgotten about it because I had spent the whole episode being like, okay, but wait, but how is Sam going to get bit? And then when all the infected started pouring out, I completely forgot to think about that. And there's like the crazy shit
Mm-hmm.
where Ellie is trying to escape from that infected little girl in the back of the truck, and then we finally see our bloater.
Can we
And then
just
did you
talk about
notice?
wait. Oh, wait, did I notice what?
I think probably we were about to say the same thing when the bloater killed Perry.
Oh my god. Yes. I was going to say that was wild.
That was outrageous. And not only that, but did you notice like that was the exact same animation that happens most of the time when bloaters kill you in the game, in the first game?
Yeah, I was still expecting the bloater to like throw what is it that I don't know, it throws like it's
Yeah, like
spores.
it pulls like little clusters of spores off itself and throws them at people. So yeah, it
But
wasn't
that
doing that, which
was,
that was a
yeah.
little crazy anyway. That's
You
something
guys,
that
you know
works in a
what's
video game.
so
My,
funny?
my,
My mom is a fan of the show, the TV show, but she tuned into the TV show because of us, and then she was like, "Well, Pedro Pascal's really good looking. I want to keep watching because of Pedro."
hey, can't say I blame her. He is good looking.
No, she told me about that scene, and she was like, "Well, I'll just continue watching because, of Pedro Pascal and Ellie, of course." I'm like, "You mean Joel and Ellie?" She's like, "Yes, that's what I mean." She doesn't do zombies.
Yeah, my sister just finally got my parents to watch it too. It's funny because like my mom has listened to the podcast but not actually watched the show. So they're finally getting on board. But it's a lot. I mean, especially like my mom doesn't really get into horror movie stuff either. So,
Yeah, so I mean,
she's
I'm
yeah,
impressed for our moms to get into
I am
scary
too.
stuff.
I am too. We
Besides,
support moms
us as their
watching horror.
children.
Right, yeah. They've already dealt with the most frightening thing that a parent could ever hope to deal with, which is children like us.
Yeah, creatives.
Yeah.
Something I really want to revisit. I mean, we don't really get to see like child zombies super often in films and TV shows. I love how the show is evolving with including these types of realities to these characters.
It's true. I just have to say it's a little bit of a tangent, but while we're on the subject, shout out to the game Days Gone, which does have child zombies
Yes.
that run in little packs. And there's parts where you have to just like hack your way through like 20 child zombies, and it's so messed up.
Oh. But again, that's what I was saying. Like in TV and film, you don't see it that often. I thought it was really cool to see it here.
It was very cool.
For Kathleen and her demise, like the fact that a child clicker took her out, that was a wild scene. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like hitting her.
Yeah, which was another cool thing because, like, that's what the infected do in the game is they just pound on you like that when they kill you sometimes. So it was cool to see that represented in the show because it's a terrifying thing. You know, it almost is like scarier than them biting you because you expect zombie type creatures to bite you, but for them to just like mindlessly pound on your face, like that's pretty scary.
Like the fact that this kid was infected probably 20 years ago and how like intense this disease is. I don't know. I was like, they don't
Dude,
grow. It
well, we
just
don't
takes over
really
their
know.
body.
Yeah, well, because they're basically, I mean, I think their body at that point is essentially a corpse that is
Just yeah.
animated by fungus, you know. But
Yeah.
also, we don't know that that kid died 20 years ago. That kid may have once lived in the tunnels in that room that we saw. That might have
Are you
been the
saying like
original
two
owner.
fungi had a relationship and like had a fungi baby?
No, no, I'm saying that at some point after the infection day, there was a bunch of kids living in the tunnels and then they died
Oh yeah.
later. And maybe that was one of those kids. You know, maybe it
Well,
was
hey
her
man, I
comic
can
book that
live and
Ellie and Sam
dream, all
found.
right?
Okay, okay, I'll leave you to your dreams of two fungi infected people having a baby together. I
Yikes.
mean, yeah, you could add that to the wish list for the rest of the season.
Well, I mean, so we're in this heightened state of Kathleen having just been killed by a child clicker and Perry having his head ripped off by a bloater. Wow, the strength of that bloater too was really felt. And just again, this chaos of all these clickers, zombies, runners just frantically throughout the background. And then there's just this into silence. And we're with Joel and Henry. That was hard for me to be honest. Again, with having just said, I was holding out hope for whatever reason that something would happen and they'd be okay. But again, we saw that Henry and Sam were getting attacked by clickers. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
I know where we're
Like
going with
this is
this.
yeah, tell you this is where it happens. Yeah, but you know, one thing though about that scene that we cut to with Joel and Henry, Joel now has changed. He is
Hmm.
inviting Henry to journey with them and is offering him a place with them. You know, he's been won over, which was also pretty crazy.
The fact that he invites Henry and Sam to go along with him, and that moment, I was like, "All right, they're gonna go along with him, and that's great." As
It's
someone
so
who
nice.
doesn't know, I know, as someone who doesn't, if I were someone that didn't know the game, I would be extremely hopeful in that moment. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. I also kind of read that as Joel also gained some respect and some trust for Henry because he saw how Henry handled himself. Like he went back to help Ellie when she needed help, and he was, you know, trying to sacrifice himself to let the kids go.
There's a really interesting connection between Ellie and Sam as they communicate when it's revealed that Sam was clearly bitten. And it kind of shows you that Ellie is still sort of like this kid and doesn't fully like understand yet. She cuts her hand and like thinks she's going to be able to cure Sam's uh infection. Oof.
Yeah,
It
it's
gets
tough.
dark.
It's like yeah, it's like it is. She really shows her youth there, and that they've done such a great job of that in the show, sort of showing Ellie's
Mhm.
wisdom and also her immaturity in places. And so yeah, you see this side of her that's sort of hedging this like unrealistic bet, or you see this side of her that's, you know, hoping for this unrealistic outcome that just by merging
Right.
her blood with his wound she can protect him. And it also, you know, and it just makes it so much more heartbreaking, and it like
Yes.
ties her character to this feeling of responsibility, and it just sort of drives home the thought that Ellie feels like she could have helped, you know.
Yeah.
Oh god, it's so heavy, man.
The fact that we like connect so deeply with these characters or we find like pieces of ourselves in them, it just makes the loss of like everything that they've gone through that much harder when we lose someone we care about. And even though these characters haven't been together for a long amount of time, there's so much hope between Henry, Sam, Ellie, and Joel. when Ellie wakes up the next morning and Sam turns into a zombie and is clearly infected.
And it was a tough, it was just this inevitability. And
I
I don't know,
know.
maybe that's something that we feel even more keenly from having played the game and knowing where this episode is going, but it's like we spend this
Mhm.
whole episode trying to sort of not look at the fact that it's ending this way. And we know they're not going to change this ending, right? But like we've been trying to talk ourselves out of the fact that it's going to happen the whole time, and then it does. And it's just never any easier.
It's really difficult for me to like navigate a conversation around what happens at the end here just because of, having lost someone to suicide, having had been someone that struggled with suicidal attempts. But I mean, Henry in this moment, I can imagine he's lost everything, absolutely everything. And after he killed Sam as an infected, it was like there was no other path for Henry. I would like to think there would have
Yeah.
been.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe he could have processed and moved on, continued and joined them. But I felt like that situation was just too extreme and Henry was purely reacting on instinct. He I mean, obviously he wasn't going to shoot Joel, but he still used the gun to keep Joel from going. And then once his attention really landed on the fact that Henry was about to kill Ellie, he again responded instinctively and did what had to be done. I mean, Sam was going to kill Ellie. He responded instinctively and killed Sam. And then he just like still hadn't really processed the situation because he's asking, what did I do? We get to the end of the episode and there's this additional wrinkle that's been added to this saga of Sam and Henry in the show, which is that Ellie is coming away from it with this
Mhm.
intense feeling of responsibility for what happened.
Yeah.
And we know that she's going to carry that forward on the next phase of the journey. And Joel is realizing this.
You can literally see her shift, and it's like she's become more hardened by saying, like, "Which way is west?" She's ready to proceed on the journey.
You really get the sense that this has been a seismic shift for Ellie specifically.
Yeah.
Um, which is a really interesting sort of highlighting of, she's thinking about the fact that she's immune and that the possible responsibility that puts on her in a new way. Like it's become clear to her in a way it hasn't before. And then of course, Joel, you know, like with every encounter that these two have on their journey, it's like a funhouse mirror of his relationship with Ellie and just like different sides of it and different ways it could play out. And now he's realizing the stakes of his connection that's growing
Yeah.
and what it really means to, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling too. It is hard to talk about.
Although not father and child, there's a responsibility. Joel even says, "It's easier as a kid. You don't have anyone depending on you." I think that's what he said. Joel knows in that moment when Ellie puts down those words on Sam's grave and says, "I'm sorry." I think for me, he knows he's now responsible fully for this child.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think maybe here at the end of the episode is where maybe Joel's feeling of responsibility for her as a child and his protection is kind of cemented. And maybe
Mm,
that's like an arc for these two episodes that began when Ellie had to shoot that raider that was attacking him, that young raider that was attacking him in the gas station. And
yeah.
then he felt all responsible for her having to be in that position of having to do violence on his behalf. And so it's like by the end of this arc of these two episodes, there could be no question that, and I think he's probably even realized that he can't really kid himself anymore. Like she's not cargo. She's a kid that he's
Yeah.
protecting.
Endure and survive.
Endure and survive. That's right.
Thank you, everybody, again for tuning in to The Fungus Among Us.
Yes, we really appreciate your continued support. And this has been an emotionally difficult episode of the TV show to get through. And it's been hard for us to figure out how to talk about it. So we appreciate you being with us on this journey.
Yeah, and we're also here for you. So please feel free to send us an email. We have our Instagram account, The Fungus Among Us Pod. Stay tuned.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.